Let's get right into it. Number 1. The dancing plague that wouldn't stop. Imagine waking up one morning in medieval France, stepping outside to buy some bread, and seeing your neighbors breakdancing uncontrollably in the street. Not for fun, not for a TikTok trend, they literally couldn't stop. Welcome to Strasbourg, 1518, home of the infamous dancing plague. It started with one woman, Frau Trofeo, who began dancing like her life depended on it. No music, or no reason, just pure, unstoppable groove. Within a week, over 30 people joined her. Within a month, there were hundreds. Some reports say they danced until their feet bled, until they collapsed, and yes, until they died. Doctors of the time blamed hot blood or divine punishment. The church blamed sin. Modern science. It's split between mass hysteria and a hallucinogenic fungus that grew on damp rye bread basically, the medieval version of a bad acid trip. The authorities even tried to fix it by hiring musicians, because obviously, when people can't stop dancing, the logical move is to add a band. Imagine a mayor in panic yelling, "Play louder," maybe they'll get it out of their system. Spoiler, it didn't work. If you're picturing a nightmarish Renaissance rave with people convulsing to invisible beats while priests panic, you're not far off. The dancing mania spread through Europe for centuries, popping up in places like Aachen, Germany, and Italy. The weirdest part, it wasn't even rare. People in the Middle Ages were so psychologically primed by religion, starvation, and stress that whole towns could snap into trance-like frenzies, sometimes dancing, sometimes laughing, sometimes screaming. It was like the entire continent needed therapy but got exorcisms instead. The dancing plague wasn't just bizarre, it showed how fear and faith can hijack a population's brain faster than any pathogen. And that's a level of weird modern pandemics haven't quite matched yet. Number 2, the sweating sickness mystery. Fast forward to 16th century England, where nobles lived in castles, peasants slept in mud huts, and everyone feared something called the sweating sickness. It hit fast, it killed faster, and no one could explain it. Here's how it worked. You'd feel chills, anxiety, maybe a little dizziness, and within hours, you'd start sweating buckets, not just normal sweating. We're talking someone left the sauna door open in your bloodstream levels. Victims described their sheets soaked through, their hearts racing, and then sudden death, often within 24 hours. No rash, no sores, just sweat, panic, drop dead. Even stranger, it targeted the rich more than the poor. Yeah, the one time being poor actually helped your survival odds. Kings, courtiers, and scholars died in droves. Henry VIII was so scared he kept fleeing from city to city like a paranoid germaphobe, which, to be fair, was the right move. Modern researchers think it might have been an early hantavirus or a rodent-borne disease from the filthy conditions of Tudor England, but no one's sure. It came, it killed thousands, and then it vanished like a horror movie that never got a sequel. There's something oddly cinematic about it. Imagine the panic, entire towns emptying overnight, priests giving last rites to sweating nobles, doctors yelling, "Get him more vinegar," because that's all they had. The sweating sickness wasn't just a plague, it was a psychological event. When people can die before sundown from a disease no one understands, society unravels. Rumors spread faster than the fever itself. Every cough sounded like a countdown. And then, as suddenly as it arrived, poof, gone. No cure, no explanation, just one of history's greatest medical ghost stories, and a reminder that sometimes the scariest diseases are the ones that don't stick around long enough to study. Number 3, the bubonic blame game. You've probably heard of the Black Death, the big, bad, medieval apocalypse that wiped out a third of Europe. But what most people don't know is just how weirdly human the reactions were. Forget wash your hands. Medieval Europe's pandemic playbook was basically panic, pray, and point fingers. When the plague hit in 1347, doctors thought it came from bad air, literally evil smells. People walked around with flowers and herbs stuffed in their masks, like medieval potpourri on legs. The logic was simple: if the stench can't reach you, death can't either. It didn't work. Then came the scapegoating. Since nobody understood bacteria, they blamed, well, everyone else: foreigners, beggars, lepers, and especially Jews who were massacred in pogroms across Europe, because some people thought they poisoned the wells. The irony, many Jewish communities actually had lower death rates because of ritual hygiene rules. In short, the clean people were blamed for being too clean. Meanwhile, the church swung between divine wrath and divine mercy, telling people to whip themselves in the streets to atone. Those flagellants half-mad, half-holy processions basically turned self-harm into a traveling roadshow, and that only spread the disease faster. If TikTok existed in 1348, it would have been full of people saying 5 herbs that keep away death and POV. You're the last survivor of your village. The Black Death wasn't just a plague, it was a social experiment in mass panic, misinformation, and weird coping mechanisms, the same ingredients you'd find in any modern crisis, just with fewer memes and more dead rats. Number 4. The Great Stink Epidemic. London, 1858. The Thames River lifeblood of the city had turned into something between soup and biological weapon. Every factory dumped its waste into it, every household poured in sewage, and in the middle of a sweltering summer, the entire city was marinating in its own filth. They called it the Great Stink. Now, technically, this wasn't a plague, but it caused one or several because the smell was so horrific. Parliament literally fled the city. Lawmakers covered their windows with lime-soaked curtains and still gagged through meetings. Newspapers described the river as a visible scum of corruption. Lovely. People genuinely believed that smell caused disease miasma theory. They thought the foul air itself spread cholera. The irony, cholera was killing thousands, but through the water, not the air, so in trying to avoid the stink, people kept drinking the problem. It took one stubborn doctor, John Snow, not the one from the wall, to prove that the source was a contaminated water pump. That discovery basically birthed modern epidemiology, but at the time, no one wanted to hear it. They were too busy blaming bad vapors and selling lemon-scented handkerchiefs. So yeah, the Great Stink didn't just make people nauseous, it forced Victorian England to realize that their greatest enemy wasn't air from hell, but their own plumbing. And the best part, Parliament only funded a proper sewer system after the smell got so bad they couldn't sit in their own chamber. Nothing like a little olfactory torture to get politicians to act. Sometimes progress doesn't start with genius, it starts when the rich can't stand the smell of their own mistakes. Number 5. The Dancing Goats and Coffee Panic. Picture this: medieval monks, exhausted from chanting and fasting, suddenly find a strange new energy drink, a bitter, steaming potion that makes them feel alive. That's right, coffee. But before it became your morning savior, it was accused of being the devil's brew. The story starts in Ethiopia, around the 9th century. A goat herder named Kaldi noticed his goats acting suspiciously energetic. They were dancing, leaping, and basically having the time of their lives after eating red berries from a certain plant. Kaldi tried them himself, got wired, and brought them to a monastery. The monks hated it, thought it was witchcraft, and threw the berries into the fire. Then came the smell. The roasting aroma hit differently. Curiosity won. They brewed it, and boom, the world's first caffeine high. But when coffee spread to the Islamic world, conservative clerics freaked out. They thought it caused radical thought. To be fair, they weren't wrong. Coffee houses became hotbeds of political debate and poetry. When it reached Europe in the 1600s, priests tried to ban it, calling it Satan's black milk. Pope Clement VIII, ever the reasonable man, decided to try it first. He loved it so much he baptized coffee just to make it officially Christian. Fast forward a century, and coffee houses became the internet of their time, buzzing with gossip, ideas, and caffeine-fueled conspiracy theories. Governments feared them, poets romanticized them, and doctors warned that coffee would dry up your brain. But here's the irony: while people panicked over this foreign poison, it was probably saving lives, since boiling water for coffee killed bacteria in places where clean water didn't exist. So yeah, the world's most beloved drink once sparked religious outrage and public paranoia, and yet today we willingly pay $6 for a cup of the same devil's juice. Humanity evolves, just never in the direction you'd expect. Number 6. The corpse medicine craze. If you think modern wellness trends are weird, like crystal healing or drinking raw celery juice, wait till you hear about corpse medicine. During the Renaissance, Europeans believed that consuming bits of human remains could heal diseases. Yep, doctors prescribed ground-up skulls, blood, and even powdered mummies. It wasn't a dark joke, it was science, or what passed for it back then. They called it mumia, Apothecaries sold jars of it. The wealthy kept it in cabinets, like essential oils, but worse. People genuinely thought mummies had healing properties because they were preserved, ancient, and exotic. The logic was something like, if it lasts 2,000 years in a tomb, it will definitely fix my headache. Even kings were into it. Charles II of England drank a concoction called the King's Drops, made from distilled human skull. Physicians swore by it. The ethical problem, they were running out of real Egyptian mummies. So, naturally, black market dealers started making fake ones by drying out fresh corpses. This was the OG influencer scam. You think detox teas are shady? Try artisanal human dust sold by candlelight. Eventually, science caught up and declared, hey, maybe cannibalism isn't medicinal, but not before several centuries of educated Europeans snacking on the dead. It's horrifying and fascinating because it shows how desperate humans get when they can't explain disease. When medicine fails, superstition fills the gap. And when superstition fails, people start seasoning it with ethics and calling it remedy. Honestly, if the apocalypse ever comes, I bet someone will bring this trend back, probably with a rebrand like bioancestral therapy. Number 7, the cholera riots. When cholera hit 19th century Europe, it didn't just kill people, it destroyed trust. Authorities told citizens not to panic, to boil water and stay calm. People responded by rioting, looting, and occasionally murdering doctors. Why? Because they thought doctors were poisoning them. In places like Russia and Poland, mobs attacked hospitals and medical workers, convinced that elites were spreading cholera intentionally to thin the poor. Even in Britain, rumors flew that doctors were dissecting patients alive for anatomy studies. You can't blame the paranoia completely. Medicine back then was sketchy, hospitals were filthy, amputation was considered a good outcome, and rich people really did get better treatment, while the poor were left to rot. So when an invisible killer appeared and the government said, trust us, the response was less than enthusiastic. The worst riot hit Liverpool in 1832. An angry mob destroyed hospitals and chased doctors out of town. In one case, people dug up bodies to prove that cholera victims were being murdered. It's a grim mirror of something we still do today when fear outpaces understanding. People cling to conspiracies. The cholera riots were the 1800s version of Plandemic video's same psychology, just fewer hashtags. Ironically, the riots delayed real progress. The reforms that could have saved thousands sanitation, clean water systems, proper sewage came only after the chaos burned out. It's a pattern history loves to repeat. Humanity only learns after it panics, denies, and accidentally punches the guy trying to help. Number 8, the French disease blame war. Before it was called syphilis, it was known as the French disease. Unless you were French, then you called it the Neapolitan disease. The Poles blamed the Germans blamed the Poles, and everyone blamed somebody else. The disease showed up in Europe in the late 1400s, right after Columbus came back from the Americas. Some historians think his sailors brought it back, the world's worst souvenir. It spread fast through armies, brothels, and royal courts. The symptoms, painful sores, insanity, and eventually, your nose collapsing. Instead of studying it, countries turned it into a game of geopolitical tag. Each nation's logic, there's no way this horrifying illness started here. It's clearly those degenerates over there. The irony, the more people denied it, the more it spread. The church called it divine punishment for lust. Doctors tried treating it with mercury ointments, basically poisoning people to cure them. And the rich, they made it fashionable. Nobles wore wigs and heavy makeup to cover the sores. Some even called it a noble disease, since only people who could afford lovers seemed to get it. The French disease story is pure human psychology, shame, denial, and branding. No one wanted to be the country that invented syphilis, so they all outsourced the blame. In the end, everyone got it anyway, a beautiful metaphor for hypocrisy and globalization. Number 9, the meowing nuns epidemic. File this one under what even was medieval Europe. In the 15th century, a French convent suddenly descended into chaos, not from disease or famine, but from meowing. It started with one nun who began meowing like a cat. Nobody knew why. Maybe stress, maybe boredom, maybe a psychotic break, but the real weirdness began when other nuns joined in. Dozens of them, all meowing together, all day long. This went on for hours, then days. then weeks. Imagine trying to pray while 30 nuns around you are doing their best impression of Garfield in choir formation. The surrounding village lost it. Locals reported hearing symphonies of mews echoing from the convent walls. Soldiers were eventually called in to restore order by threatening to whip anyone who didn't stop, and just like that, silence. Modern psychologists call it mass psychogenic illness basically, contagious hysteria triggered by stress. Back then, convents were emotional pressure cookers. Nuns lived under strict discipline, cut off from the world, often against their will, so the body found its own, creative way to rebel. There were other convent outbreaks too. In Germany, nuns started biting each other. In Italy, they screamed for days. One group claimed to be possessed by demonic kittens. Freud would have had a field day. It's both hilarious and tragic when society gives people no outlet. The mind invents its own, even if that outlet involves pretending to be a cat. So yes, centuries before TikTok filters, there were already catgirls. They just needed exorcisms instead of followers. Number 10, the vampire tuberculosis panic. Before medicine knew what bacteria were, people had to fill in the blanks, and when it came to tuberculosis or consumption, they filled those blanks with vampires. In 19th century New England, families were dying one by one from a mysterious wasting disease. Victims grew pale, coughed blood, lost weight, and slowly wasted away. Locals decided that one of the dead must be draining the life from the others. Logical? Right. The solution: dig up the corpses. If one looked too fresh, that was your vampire. They'd remove the heart, burn it, and feed the ashes to the sick as a cure. Because of course they did. The most famous case was Mercy Brown, an 18-year-old from Rhode Island. After her mother and sister died, Mercy succumbed too. Her family exhumed her body months later, found it well preserved, and assumed she was undead. They burned her heart and mixed the ashes into medicine for her brother. He died 2 months later. Shocking. This wasn't some medieval superstition, it happened in 1892. While people in cities were discussing germ theory, rural America was still fighting vampires with shovels and campfires. What's fascinating is that it wasn't stupidity, it was grief logic. When science offers no answers, people will make sense of suffering however they can, and sometimes that sense just happens to involve barbecuing your relatives. So next time someone says science ruins the magic, remember the magic used to involve grave robbing and heart smoothies. Number 11, the blue plague of fear. Not every plague came from microbes, some came from the mind. During the 1890s in Paris, newspapers started reporting mysterious deaths, people turning blue and collapsing after being near public telephones or electric lamps. They called it the blue plague. Electricity was new, nobody understood it, and like all new tech, it freaked people out. Some believed it could drain life force or corrupt the soul. Others swore their skin tingled whenever they walked near wires. Soon, mass hysteria kicked in. Women fainted near electric trams. Men claimed their hands glowed after touching switches, and the media ran with it, full-page headlines warning of death by invisible currents. The funny part, electricity did occasionally kill people through poor insulation and sketchy wiring, but 90% of the reported cases were psychosomatic. People literally imagined themselves being zapped to death. It's the same phenomenon that happened centuries earlier with witches and demons, just rebranded for modernity. We always fear what we can't see: demons, germs, radiation, Wi-Fi. The blue plague eventually faded when society got used to light bulbs. Fear turned into fascination, and within a decade, Paris went from terrified to proudly calling itself the City of Light. Nothing proves humanity's adaptability more than our ability to go from "this magic force will kill us all" to "let's hang it on every wall and make it pretty." Number 12, the Spanish flu party era. The 1918 flu pandemic was one of the deadliest in history, killing around 50 million people, yet it gave birth to something totally unexpected: the Roaring Twenties. During the flu, the world shut down. Schools, theaters, and churches closed. Masks were mandatory. People were fined for sneezing in public. Sound familiar? But here's the kicker: once it ended, society didn't just go back to normal. It exploded into chaos, fashion, and jazz. Psychologists say it was a classic overcorrection. After 2 years of death and dread, people wanted to feel alive. So they drank, danced, gambled, and redefined culture. Morality loosened, skirts shortened, parties got louder. the trauma of a pandemic literally birthed the modern nightlife. It's like history's emotional hangover. We survive horror, then we overcompensate with glitter. And the science behind it makes sense. Collective trauma builds repression. Once it lifts, humans flood the other way, seeking stimulation, connection, and risk. The same pattern happened after the Black Death, after World War II, and arguably after COVID. So yeah, the Spanish flu wasn't just tragedy, it was a psychological springboard, from coughs to cocktails, from funerals to flapper dresses. Because when humanity's been reminded how fragile life is, our response is rarely quiet reflection. It's usually, turn up the music, we're not dead yet. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.